first encounter on my pedal board is the Shure tuner and wireless system. It's not really a sound there, but it's a fantastic tuner. And right after that, we're going into the first piece. This is a mark-based compressor, is an Octave compressor, and I think it's probably one of the best compressors I've ever tried in my life. But not only as far as a pedal compressor, but it can be used also in regular studio applications. It's fantastic because it's incredibly dynamic. It helps a lot when you play, but I mean, you feel it, but you don't really hear it. And that's great for me because I hate sounds that are super compressed, especially bass. I want to play something without compressor. When I turn the compressor on, basically, it kind of like tunes in more accuracy. That's how I like to describe it. And I love it because you don't really feel the of a lot of heavy compressors, but it kind of like gives you that extra boost to maintain your walking or chopping or popping consistent. So basically helps every note to come out right. Next is the Senzamp GT2. This is probably the oldest pedal the Tech 21 ever produced. I got it probably like 30 years ago. We used to reamp instruments out of multi-track recorders. And now I'm using it on my pedal board, not much for distortion, super crazy distortion, but just to give my instrument a little bit of grit, kind of like emulating some of the old school amp tube amps that give you kind of like that little phrasal on the top end, and that's fantastic. It's just like really the kind of sound that I like, and it's incredibly helpful to cut through the sound, whether you're playing live or you're recording. Second element, well, my Senzamp pedal. This is like I would say it's a gift to bass player, in this case me. Here's, for example, a simple walk. I'm muting it. But if I turn this guy on, if I try to do the same thing without it, it's good, but that extra sustain always helps. Next pedal is the Envelope Filter by MXR. This is a very particular piece. It was a present from Billy F. Gibbons from ZZ Top, and he actually tweaked it. On the back of this piece, inside, when you replace the battery, there is access to a couple of processors. I'm not really sure what they are because I'm not really an electronic engineer, but it's something that everybody can do with a screwdriver. Billy knows where he's putting his hand on, and he did a fantastic job. And this piece, it's incredible because it does what an envelope filter is supposed to do without killing the low end and remaining very, very dynamic. Envelope, I think, is another effect that it's a mandatory on bass. You need to have it. I mean, at least me. It's one of those things that, especially when I play those kind of like soft or slow, cool funk grooves, it helps a lot. It brings that extra character, that extra sexiness. If you got something like turn on the envelope. Next in line, another MXR piece. This is a bass octave. I love it because I can hear the octave. It works really well. It's dynamic, but it's not overpowering. And sometimes I have it in and I don't even know that I have it, and I realize that it's in only when I turn it off. So that's how I like to use this kind of pedals. And again, fantastic piece, and it's a big part of my sound. The other indispensable tool in my arsenal is the Octave. I love this thing because even a simple riff. Gives that extra bite growl without making it too bombastic. I like to combine it, with the Sans amp because it gives me the extra bite on top of the extra growl. So well, this is a good one. It took me a long time to find it. They were quite famous in the, I guess, early 90s or so, and then kind of disappeared. This is a super feedbacker and distortion. I use this pedal for when I need the distorted sound, or like a full-blown distortion sound on the bass, but also to generate feedbacks. It's quite particular. I never really heard it on a bass before, but I guess it works really well with my gear. Other very interesting tool in my pedal board is the super feedback. I like this pedal because, I mean, of course, if you do the gives you the extra, obviously, distortion, in-your-face sound, but that particular kind of feedback, I like it because I feel then it kind of like the war is on with the guitar player in the band, right? In addition, I use this pedal a lot in combination with some of the other guys. I'm going to show it to you later, in addition to the synth, because, again, I don't know, I guess I was really lucky and ended up with this combination of pedal, but it always had something that I think it's part of my sound, without muddying up too much. I mean, it's extreme, it's in your face, but it still cuts through the mix and you still can easily understand what the bass is doing. This is another great piece. This is a Phase 100. I can go from regular phaser to full-blown bubbly sounds, very vintagey. I prefer it to the Phase, compared to the Phase 90, because he has more options, and I think it deals with bass frequency in a more warm and balanced way. Next tool in my toolbox here is the Phase 100. I love this guy because when you have, for example, parts like well, this is the bass alone, just a little compressor, but if I turn this guy in, this is kind of like, I would say, is an average speed that I keep the pedal set on. Obviously, I can go a little bit slower, and that would be good also for some radio part, like or you can go all the way up and have that kind of psychedelic 60s over bubbly sound. And this works great, especially when you are in a trio type of situation, or there's no like too many guitar players or too many keyboard players. Doing this kind of sound, you just lay it low under the guitar player, and it can well do all these things, and you keep it all together. And I really, really like this pedal. And this is probably the jewel of my pedal board, the Super Sync by Mark Bass. This pedal also works as a Octave, but I'm using it on the synth side. It comes with a lot of great preset. I created my own banks, and I use this for rhythm parts, but also for solos. And it's just so good that sometimes it sounds like something that a bass synth from a keyboard will give you. And now I'm going to show you a couple of examples. As they say, save the best for last. My bass synth is just phenomenal. I mean, I use several different presets, not that many, because I'm not like a keyboard player, and for the kind of music that I generally do, it's not that you like to hear synths all the time, but this particular type of approach on specific riffs and parts, it helps the song to come alive, and I think it brings some extra character. I'm just gonna show you some of my sounds. Like this is a fairly simple one that I use when I sometimes work on some rhythms, like it's kind of like almost like a Moog type of sound, which is cool. You can, go that way, but again, I ain't no Larry Dunn, and we're not playing with Earth, Wind and Fire, unfortunately, because it's one of the best bands ever existed. But this kind of tools helps you to get to that close to that world. Something, for example, that I use a lot as well is this kind of sound. Another sound that I use quite often is this. This is very kind of like muted, almost like envelope-y, but very funky for those kind of it might sound muddy and everything, but trust me, this is the kind of thing that when you play tight with the drummer and you lay down a groove like that with this kind of sound, it sounds like that you're back in the 70s with a big funky band, and I really love that. This is a sound that I use a lot, again, especially when I play like very open rhythms like this kind of stuff. It helps a lot. And ultimately, my favorite here, I generally had my distortion, so
Hey, Ryan here. Hope you guys are doing great. So here I am in conversation with Fabrizio Grossi. This dude is based in Los Angeles. He's a producer, songwriter, and a bass player. So if you are into rootsy rock, Americana, alternative soul, this is the dude you have to check out. You're gonna find all the links in the description. He's everywhere, man. So you can just Google him, and he's freaking everywhere. So if you are into such videos, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. So enough for me rambling on. Let's dive right into this one. Hey, man, let's kick this off by you introducing yourself, saying, who is Fabrizio Grossi in your own words, man?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ryan, for having me. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. Well, Fabrizio Grossi is it's a derivative name because I had to change it when I entered the Witness Protection Festival. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. Okay, no. It's actually my real name. Everybody calls me Fab. I was born in Milan, Italy. I'm not coming from a music family. I mean, everybody loved music in the family, but there was no professional musicians or artists in the family. I guess I was the first one. I always wanted to play guitar in the beginning, but I started kind of like late. And my buddies from school, they were already in bands. They wanted me around because we were friends, but I kind of like sucked at guitar. And they told me, because again, they were already at like 3-4 years into it. And I was just like, fresh you picking it up. And they told me, we already have 3 guitars and you're the worst one, so you should be playing bass. And I'm like, what's bass? Because
That's so freaking rude, man.
I know. And I was like, what's bass? And they told me, well, it's just like a guitar, but 4 strings instead of 6 back then, at least. And I'm like, wow, sounds easier. So, the switch was immediate. And within a year or so, I was playing with a lot of other bands around Milan and stuff. So fast forward in it, I started collaborating with Italian artists, more famous Italian artists, I would say. And I had a band. We kept traveling between Italy and North America and all of it. And when the band disbanded, I decided to give it a try. I still had a lot of friends in Toronto and in New York. I came over the States. I joined a band with a fantastic drummer, Johnny Mack, and a guitar player, Anthony Bambino. We started our own, I would say, instrumental fusion rock, the psychedelic thing. And I did a bunch of things in New York with them. That's where kind of like my passion for production got really focused in, even though I was already carrying it from Italy, because in Italy was not a rock and roll country to begin with.
Yeah.
And when I started going out with my band, try to record demos and stuff, you will go to a studio, bring a record, just to give them an idea of what you wanted. And then we'll go completely the opposite. So I started to kind of like take things in my own hands. New York, that was a better experience. We turned the house band into a recording studio. We're recording our music, but also local bands. Yeah. And then in the end of '95, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was able to get my first, relevant gig as a musical director with Nina Hagen. And right within a couple of months, I ended up recording with Steve Vai. That kind of like opened the door for a lot of other collaborations with musicians in terms of bass player. But right around that time is like when I ended up in signing my first production deal with Warner. Yeah. And it's been a non-stop ever since. Kind of like put on the side the touring for a while, I would say for about 15 years, because I had a daughter. And I didn't want my daughter to grow up fatherless, and so I focused more on studio recording. And of course, I played and all of it, but never like long tours or anything like that. But about 10 years ago, I joined my dear friends Steve Lukather and Kenny Aronoff and Steve Weingart in this, I would say, spin-off fusion rock, jam band. We tour with that, and kind of like that gave me the bug back of the touring life. And after 4 years, my daughter was a little older. She was one of the, I would say, pressure point for me to get back into more live performing. And that's when I started Supersonic Blues Machine, which is the band that I have with Kenny Aronoff and right now with Chris Barris, actually on the suggestion of Billy F. Gibbons. And we have a bunch of other guests that record and tour with us all the time. And this past, I would say 2 weeks ago, I released the first single with my first solo, I would say solo band. It's not really solo because I have a band. It's kind of like an oxymoron, say a solo band. Which is it? Is it a band or is it a solo? So, and it's called Soul Garage Experience. And here we are. I think I kind of like I gave you the quick version.
So currently, how many bands are you in at this moment?
Uh, Two. Supersonic Blues Machine and
Yeah,
Soul Garage Experience. Then
yeah,
obviously a bunch of different collaborations,
yeah,
studios, live, and all of that. But these two are
yeah,
I would say, my marriage is Supersonic Blues Machine, and my love affair is, my kuma, as they say in
yeah.
the Sopranos, is Soul Garage Experience.
Yeah, so you are the bass player for these two bands, or do you sing at all?
Of course, I'm not a singer, but on my solo band, I had to pick up that role.
Yeah,
Always Supersonic, I handle, obviously some BVs and stuff, and
yeah,
being producing and writing most of the material, I had to lay down vocals and all of it, but never like as a definitive thing. It's
yeah,
always like I put down this reference, then the real guy comes in, and does it. With Soul Garage, it was kind of like it happened in
yeah,
a very unorthodox way.
yeah,
I was looking to get a permanent singer for the band, but once again, Billy Gibbons and then my wife was like, "Those songs that you recorded,
yeah,
they sound good like that." But she, not really. But no, but you come across with the right message, so that you don't need to do any more than that.
yeah,
So again, Soul Garage
yeah,
Experience is a variety show. Pretty much everybody else in the band sing, so they have their time on stage to do their own thing. But
yeah.
it's good for once, kind of like. Not having to rely on everybody else to be able to go out and play.
Yeah, cool, man. And in the background there, I can see. I think that's an Ibanez there. Am I right, man? That's an Ibanez bass that you've got.
Absolutely. This is my new baby. It's just called Ziggy. It's actually his name. It's Ibanez SR Series 2600 Prestige.
Yeah,
Love this instrument. Incredible. Very versatile.
yeah,
Even too much. But I got
yeah,
my perfectioned
yeah.
settings, so it's working good. And then you see another one right behind me. This is Brutus, and it's the younger brother. It's another one.
That looks awesome,
Somehow
man.
same. Curious again. I don't really know that if it's a 2600 Prestige or anything like that,
Yeah,
because as soon as I saw it, this is like that one. I wanted it. Different electronics. They're both active. This one
yeah,
has Aguilar pickups and active, but they're fantastic instruments. Very,
yeah,
very easy to play.
yeah,
In spite maybe of being a big guy, I kind of like have small fingers. So
yeah,
like old school basses, like jazz, like
yeah,
Fender scales and stuff are not really, I love those sounds,
yeah,
but they're not really comfortable for me to play. These
yeah,
guys, I mean, the neck is as thin
yeah,
as it comes.
yeah.
And,
I've got one in
it
the
makes my life
background
easier.
there, man. I think that is like an SR8 some series or whatever. I totally get the neck. It's good from a guitarist, but you're playing guitar, then you want to track on a bit of bass. So that worked out for me. So I know exactly what you mean. So which would be your go-to bass from the two that you just showed me there?
Well, I have a bunch of other instruments, and when
Yeah,
I'm in the studio, it's
yeah,
always a variety based upon the songs. I have a couple of five strings, but to be honest with you, mostly
yeah,
for the music that I do, I prefer play four, unless I'm getting requested to play five for some specific productions or songs. Um, I would say for the last 2.5 years, Ziggy has been my
yeah,
go-to guy.
yeah,
It's amazing because even though it's a modern instrument, and it really, I was telling the folks at Ibanez, that
yeah,
really blew my mind the technology that is behind these instruments. Because
yeah,
I always been into boutique artisanal
yeah,
basses, and I have a couple of ones that I developed with an Italian boutique called Mane. They are
yeah,
fantastic, like jazz bass, 24 fret, like they look vintage, all beat up, and they're fantastic. And all those instruments are great. However, they followed, I mean, they're probably better built on the base, on the specs of what was happening in the 50s and in the
yeah,
60s. These guys are like sci-fi compared to that, because you can
yeah,
tell the technology that they went in was coming from, I would say, not necessarily younger people, but
yeah,
younger in terms of thinking, the spacing, the strings, the way the wood is structured and it's cut, the
yeah,
electronic and everything, the balance, it's completely insane. And some of the old instruments, they
yeah,
sound so good because obviously
yeah,
seasoned wood and all of that. However, sometimes you really have to dominate them
yeah.
because, what makes them special, they have a
Of
little
course, man.
things here and there. This guy, as soon as I plugged it in,
I mean, everything was super even. Every string,
Yeah.
it's even. And every note that I play on each string, of course, I mean, obviously, if you play something on the low E, it sounds thicker rather than what I play on the G string.
Yeah.
However, the level is consistent. There's no drops, there's no bumps or anything like that.
Yeah.
And even my bandmates, as soon as they heard me plugging this thing in, were like, whoa, what the hell is that? Because it's just like, it sounds like that it's a mastered instrument. You know, when you record a
Yeah.
record and you mix it, and it's still very dynamic, then you master it, everything is fine, and it's all brought up to in your
Yeah.
face, right?
Yeah.
This thing is just like that. So I
Yeah.
couldn't be happier.
Yeah. Oh, cool, man. That sounds awesome. So, what amps do you use for your recording, and do you use those same amps for a live situation?
Well, I guess the spirit is the same. I'm gonna show you later. Actually, let me see if I can move this thing around so probably you guys can see it. This is a Mark bass,
Cool, man.
little Mark tube,
Yeah.
and it's fantastic. It's my favorite bass amp.
Yeah.
I've been with Mark bass for about probably 20 years. It's actually my sound. It's the sound of my fingers, and I like it because it gives me like an incredible clean source.
Yeah.
And it's very accurate. They're reliable, and most of all, they're super light.
Yeah.
You know, so even if you see this big refrigerator, doesn't weigh 1/5 of. I'm not going to mention names, but famous old school
Yeah,
amps,
yeah.
this kind of size, that it will require 3 people to move it.
Yeah.
But then again, it's not only that, because let me see if I can show you this. This is my pedal board, and
That
she's got a
looks
name
cool.
too. She's Mrs. Jones. Okay.
That looks awesome,
and
man.
there's always a bunch of things. I'll give you later a more introspective tour between the pedals, but there is a bunch of colors and tweaks here that I use all the time. To be honest with you, I'm not a fan of bass cable amplification. I mean, unless in this case, probably the old amps would probably work better, because that super compression with the tubes and all of it was already kind of like having like a couple of pedals.
Yeah.
However, nowadays things are different, and of course I use always a compressor. I have an Octave compressor by Mark bass. It's probably one of the best compressors I've ever tried, and not only on bass, but in general. This is kind of like, it helps me to keep everything smooth and consistent without really feeling the extra squash of the compressor. Then I use, of course, an old Tech 21 Sense amp. This is probably the first pedal that they made, the GT2. It was the first pedal that I acquired when I moved to New York. We used that thing to reamp tracks. Back then, there were no reamping systems. So you would take a cable straight out of the machine and you go back maybe to another channel to the board. However, if you would have run it through one of these guys, the sound would automatically come alive. And I use this to give it a little extra grit. And then I have the other stuff, the colors. Mainly a bass envelope filter from MXR that was a present from Billy Gibbons, but it's not that I'm using it because it was a present from Billy. It's just because Billy, he didn't tell me what he did, but he tweaked. And he reacts to the bass in an awesome way, meaning I'm not losing the low end. And generally, when you use envelope filter, you get a nice wow, but the low end tends to go and disappear sometimes. This guys is fantastic. Then also I have a bass Octave that I'm using quite often, another MXR, and then a bunch of different distortion. I have a Phase 100 and Mark bass synth, which is something that especially for Soul Garage experience, I'm using quite a lot, because going back to what we were saying earlier, especially on the numbers that I'm singing, there is a few things that I cannot really fully play and sing everything that I do normally. So I need a kind of a different sound to help, I would say, fill up some of the holes or, the new arrangements. And the bass synth does it quite beautifully, because it reminds me some of those old 70s Larry Dunn with Earth, Wind and Fire kind of thing, and,
cool.
It's definitely a major help.
Awesome, man. So what brand of strings are you using? Do you have like a custom gauge, or do you stick to one brand and don't
Of
look
course,
back?
I'm an aficionado Ernie Ball string user. I'm using a very very thin gauge. I'm using 40,
Yeah.
65, 75, 95. And I know that a lot of people, and mostly your listener, are going like, that's well, you know what? At the end of the day, the sound is
Yeah.
in your hands.
Yeah. If it works for you, man, that's all that matters, right? If it works for you.
But you know what? I think that's a myth that, to be honest with you, needs to be kind of like dismissed. The fact that you need to have like big strings. I mean, I got into that, no argument, but in that kind of trend a few times. I started off with GHS, same kind of gauge.
Yeah.
And then I was producing a live record with Carmine Appice and the legendary TM Stevens with Pat Travers. And TM was giving me crap about the smaller gauges and all of that. Yeah. And he gave me a set of the strings that he was using. He was using Vin Markley back then. Yeah. I have to, make a consideration. Yeah. TM is about a foot on me, so is a bigger guy in that sense. And I guess a 45 versus 40, it just doesn't feel anything under his hands. To me, it was a major thing. So I started to play with those strings. Great tone, a great sound, but I had to change my playing. And then once again, Billy Gibbons was telling me about this anecdote that happened at the beginning of his career when they were opening for B.B. King, and he ended up in picking up Lucille on a tour bus with BB, and he was blown away on how the action was low and the string was small. And he was telling BB, hey, how can you play like this? And BB was like, whoa, what are you using? And obviously, Billy, proud Texan, brings out this guitar with power chord. I mean, basically, it was like power lines instead of strings. And BB was like, son, what do you want to work that hard? The sound is in your hands. Just get something that makes you comfortable. You're going to be able to control your sound. And Bill was really insisting on that. And I tried a couple of different strings, and obviously all my other friends, guitar player from Steve Vai to Steve Lukather and Billy himself, they all use fairly small, gauges. And I'm like, And I love the feel of Ernie balls on guitars. I mean, I often pick up Vai or Luke's guitar, and they feel awesome. Sometimes you have those strings that kind of like scrape your fingertips and stuff. These guys are like really smooth, and yet they feel like strings that you've been using already for a couple of days. Yeah. But they have a sound of a new set of strings. So I said, I want to see what happens with bass strings from this gauge. I put it on the first time. I was blown away, and that's all I use right now.
Yeah. Awesome, man. That sounds great. So, who would be your influences as a bass player, man?
Oh, way too many. To be honest with you, the thing is, I'm a self-taught musician. I had a very bad experience with an awful teacher in Milan when I was trying to join the conservatory for upright and all that. The guy basically, it just got me to abandon studies. Everything that I learned was like self-taught. And because of that, I never really sat down and study like one specific bass player or try. I mean, I absorbed all the music that I could. I would say in the beginning, in my early days of playing, I mean, all the standards, and the majority were British guys. Steve Harris of Iron Maiden, of course, Geezer Butler, John Paul Jones, and obviously Jack Bruce, the master. All those guys were like a big part of of me playing. I love to jam to those records. And I would say my style is like a mix with, of all those dudes with an American component. And the American component were, all the funk guys, Larry Graham and, Verdine White, all those cats, Billy Cox. So, and I would say this is probably old school among the young till a point, because he still has a couple of years on me. I would say one that I like the most and I got the most out of him is definitely Flea.
All right, cool, man. I love the dude. Who doesn't? So, being a producer, man, how do you actually produce other bands? And do you have like a private studio where you do your own work and you maybe produce other bands, and do they come to your studio? How does it all work, the life of Fabrizio Grossi as a producer?
Well, where we are now, I'm going to give you like a quick panoramic. This is my studio. Over there, there's the control room. I do a lot of work here. I mean, most of the records for Supersonic and My Man is done here. But it's cool to have a space because I write, I do my mixes and all that kind of stuff. But I, work in different studios all the time. I will say that though 80% of my work it's done in my place because it's more comfortable. I know all my gear, and
Yeah.
I always have control. But I like sometimes to go to other places because that will allow me to sometimes to step off the multitasking, like producer, engineering,
Yeah.
and all of that,
Yeah.
and maybe just be focused on the production end, or just the playing based upon what it
Yeah.
happens. But it's
Yeah.
like I said, every project different, and also it differs by the artist and the band. So sometimes you're working with a big guy, and obviously attention needs to be paid to some specific things. And then sometimes you work with a newer band, which is an
Yeah.
incredible experience and talent, because you have to learn. You get to learn a lot of things
Yeah,
and
of
learn
course,
how
man.
to see things in a totally different and younger perspective. But then again, there are some challenges that are going along with that needs to be taken into consideration. I would say that my studio is definitely well equipped to allow me to kind of like deal with this kind of circumstances,
Yeah.
and actually I'm in a great place because next door to me there
Yeah.
is actually my drummer in Supersonic Blues Machine, the world famous Kenny Aronoff. That's easy. His studio.
Yeah.
Next room after that, there is actually a room that Steve Lukather owns, and across his room there is Mark Orlando. So this building is like the who's who minus me
Yeah.
of the LA music scene. So
That's
it's
awesome, man.
I'm sucking in all the good vibes.
That sounds so cool, man. So, what is it? Can I just say, if you got a track you're working on and you want to put down some bass lines on a roughly kind of how long, as you're listening to the track, do you know what bass lines you're going to lay it down, or how long will it take for you to kind of commit to a bass line, say roughly a 3-minute track or whatever?
Well, as Luke would say, it ain't a race, man. So, I mean, I understand sometimes, and back in the days when you were doing like back-to-back session,
Yeah.
time was of essence. So the quicker you would get the hell out of there, it was appreciated. However, nowadays, I mean, for the last 15 years, things have changed, and I think it's more important what you end up in delivering more than how quick you ended up in delivering.
Yeah.
And I think, and since this whole thing changes, and majority of people works either like with the producer's own recording studio or with their own studio, you don't get to go to the commercial facilities quite that often. That is always running on a clock and all of it. I think you have a little bit more room to kind of like experiment, because of course I can get an idea, but necessarily what I hear in my head, it might not necessarily what it's good for the client if I'm playing something for somebody else. For my stuff, the process is a little bit different, because sometimes, even on my songs, if I have an idea, I document a quick the idea on the iPhone. I'm just recording like a quick note. Either I sing it, I play it, a couple of riffs with the guitars or bass. Then I put together the demo. Sometimes the first thing that goes down together with these scratches is actually the bass on a click or on a program machine, just to kind of like get the feel. And I guess because that's my instrument and I always think groove first. I think in my past life I was a drummer, because I always think drums. I think the drummer is the most important person in the band, and the band sounds only as good as its drummer. If you got a great drummer, the band's gonna sound fantastic. If you have a weak drummer, I don't care if the guitar player is Pat Metheny and the other one is Steve Vai and the singer is Robert Plant. I mean, the whole thing is just destined to crumble and not to sustain itself. And so I kind of like always think like that. And it ended up recording a lot of songs where I'm picking up a bass, and sometimes for my stuff, it's like an old P bass that forces me not to play as much as I would play, or I play with these guys, because it's a little bit more difficult. So I stick to the basics, but at least I lay down the groove. And on several of the songs on my most recent record, Counterfeit Solstice, which is the debut album of Fabrizio Grossi and Soul Garage Experience, but as much as on several records of Supersonic Blues Machine, Kenny and the other guys ended up in recording to my bass line, because it was at the right groove. And she's like, you know what, it feels good, I don't want to change. So no, we play to that. So sometimes obviously we play together, sometimes it's overdub, and I never really make it like I need to get it done now, I need to get it done later. It's done when it
done.
feels right. But again, I mean, if I know the song and I have the idea,
Yeah.
just within the hour, it's cool. But actually, let me see if I can. If the lights helps here, I want to show you guys something that I was putting together. So
We're
for all
getting
the
a
guys
freaking awesome grand tour, man. Thanks very much for this.
absolutely. Okay, now we're in the control room now. I need to do something here because otherwise it's not letting me in. But this is actually, I guess, a trick for all tracking bass players.
Yeah.
I'm working on Pro Tools, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my recording here. You were asking me before about
Yeah,
the
of
amps, right?
course, man.
Okay. Now, this is a very particular thing because I have a multi-bass, Mark bass multi-amp. This is
Yeah.
a kind of like a Mark bass equivalent of a fractal or like a camper. Is
Yeah.
it kind of like emulates a bunch of different amps and stuff.
Yeah.
And for the type of music that I do, but in general, I like to have this one set up to sound like an old amp, maybe
Yeah.
like some of those like old SVTs or those orange from the 60s. They're very boomy but compressed,
Yeah.
not just tight. I mean, in other
Yeah.
words, right? Then I have these fantastic piece. This is a Mark Studio Pro.
Yeah.
Mark Bass stopped making this, but actually, together with my friend that owns the signature of this amp, it's a famous Italian bass player named Paolo Costa. He played with
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah.
big guys, in the pop community. This system, it's fantastic because he has a one line, this one, that it's basically an amped line,
Yeah.
3 different kind of tubes and distortion, and then you have a DI section. So when I'm recording 4 tracks.
Yeah.
2 because I'm taking it from this preamp, which is for me the best. I mean, everyone that I record with, other bass players too, bigger guys that I cannot mention because they're not necessarily using this gear, but they ended up in using it, recording with me, because it's the DI is so pristine and the amp replication, it's just pure, beautiful, really nice, and it will take you days to try to get a sound like that if you try to put a microphone in front of the cabinet. So I'm using this as the main source of my bass going into the recording. That machine feeds through the 2 different outs that you had in the back, meaning tuner out, which is flat, unbiased, and everything. It feeds the multi-amp. And the other one, it goes into this old Line 6 bass pod. That's like 2nd generation. And I only use it for the sub channel. Basically, I'm recording like an octave lower, but with a sub tone. And I sneak it in within the 4. So because generally when you record bass, in general, I tend not to use much EQ or anything like that. And I think one of the most common mistakes everybody does when they record bass is just go to the low end and they just try to crank it, whether it's 80 hertz, 100 hertz, and all of that. The instrument already has all the frequency that you need. You don't need to just drive crazy that. And actually, I noticed if you ended up in cutting off, like a completely bypassing everything that is like below 20 hertz or 25, 30 hertz sometimes, it will clear up the whole thing. Now, these instruments are really, really, really good with that and will allow me to record the bass without trying to make it sound fatter than what it is. And I would use the sub track compressed obviously at the end to avoid any different peak and all of it, just to add in enough amount of natural low end, the sub that really gets the subwoofer to drive when you play a record back or also when you play live, without screwing around with the clarity and the rest of the instrument tone. And I found that that system to be quite efficient, not only for again, blues, rock, soul, whatever, hard rock, however you want to call it, but also when it comes down to pop music or any other recordings with bass. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and obviously you always learn different tricks and stuff. And this is so far has been my favorite kind of setup for recordings.
Cool, man. That's been some awesome, great tips for recording bass. Can't thank you enough for that little tour there through your gear.
Absolutely.
It's cool that even though you're old school, you still, try to get into modeling and stuff like that with amps, which is, very rare. Either you stick to, modelers or, the old school way. amps and stuff like that. It's cool to see you kind of blend both in.
Well, you know what, Ryan? I think, I mean, there's always something good and there's always
Yeah.
something worse and there's always something better.
Yeah.
If we would have had this conversation about 7 or 8 years ago,
Yeah.
where some of the first modeler came out,
Yeah.
I would have said, yeah, good idea, nice thought, but we'll talk about it when they will sound right. And I'm not talking about only the latency. I'm talking
Yeah.
about something that was missing. And actually, I was the first one to be a very discriminating dude against this kind of stuff. I mean, I remember we were gearing up for Steve Vai tour with Evolution Tempo and Orchestra. We toured all Europe from Russia to Spain. I wasn't playing, actually. I was a producer of the tour and the live DVD that was playing around. And I remember with Steve, and Steve had 2 different fractal audio that worked in this system. And I was like, dude, the effect sounds good. Use it for the effects, but the amps, just stick to your amp. I mean, it's just always better. Yeah. And you're always trying to find the easiest solution, because obviously modelers and stuff like that are easy to carry, light. You have all the solution. It's obviously, it's more convenient, but back then we're not really quite there. But working close to the manufacturers that I'm working with and with the musicians, I seen like a step by step, almost like on a gradual improvement of the machine. Feel like, I would say 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, our guitar player with Supersonic, Chris Paris, he's another DV Mark guy, but he started to bring on tour his Fractal. We did a bunch of samples for some amps and all of it. And we were like, what the hell? Every night his sound was phenomenal on stage and outside. It was right here, perfect. It set up time, 2 minutes versus us, the microphone, the whole thing and everything. And when you have, like, again, we were touring with Billy Gibbons then. It was our guest for the tour. And Billy's like renowned to be a gearhead and a major player with amps and, tone master. And we were having this conversation because we were talking about some other records that we did in the past with other guitar players that were really picky about their amps. And I remember that he plugs in into Chris' gear and he turns around to me and he was like, man, I think it's about time we change the way we're doing things. Because, it's always been, of course, you're always going to play with this Magnetone or the JCM 900 with the stage gain and all of it. But how convenient, not only convenient, but really you could not tell the difference between the amp that we just sampled and the sound coming out of the camper. So we're like, you know what? Let's kind of like drop the preconceived notions and let's get into more of that. And since I've done this, I've been seeing things that are insane. Even the new Line 6 system. Actually, a friend of mine, exactly. It was a great producer here in town, a great guitar player, Michael Herring. Everybody knows him as Fish. He was with Prince and obviously Christina Aguilera, and he does a lot of pop and rock sounds. I mean, I was hanging with him and he showed me this old stuff. I mean, still to me requires a little bit too much computer or technical knowledge to be able to program the whole thing, or at least to get a proper handle on it. I mean, the good thing about the old amps is like, dude, you got 5 pots. It's no rocket scientist. Turn it on, just dial in and you do it. Now with these guys, you have this option, the other option, and then you store it, then you recall it. So you need to kind of like change more your frame of mind and the frame of working rather than the tone that you're looking at. But we ended up in being a few things and the possibilities that these instruments have, and it's just like insane. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I'm totally open. And at the end of the day, it has to sound good. I mean, I don't care how much unkosher, unorthodox the whole thing is. If it works for you and you're happy and it sounds good, God bless you. Use it. Don't listen to the rest of the guys.
Personally, man, in the studio here, I use an Axe-Fx. On the road, live gigs, it's a Line 6 Helix because it's easy. I've set it up in a way where it changes my guitars and, my vocals, everything change via program automation. So it's as you say, it's just easier to carry things around.
Oh, big time, especially considering on the life of a touring
Yeah.
musicians that every penny counts, and the extra baggage and the
Yeah.
extra luggage or the
Yeah.
extra 10 minutes that you need to set up something for sound check and all of it. If you have everything within your own control,
Yeah.
that's the way to go.
And you don't
That's the
mess
way
up
to
your
go.
back,
Absolutely.
man, as you get older.
Thank you. By the way, the other thing that I love about these guys,
Yeah, freaking light.
I,
Yeah, I totally
I
get
don't
what
know
you
how
mean.
they
Yeah.
I don't know how they can sound like this,
Yeah.
but being this light, but
Yeah.
it's such a relief. Sometimes you pick up some of those like great
Yeah.
old basses. A friend of mine was visiting me a couple of weeks ago, and he pulled up these two Gibson basses, and RG I love the design of the RG, and a Gibson grabber from like early 70s. Oh my God, it was like lifting a couch. I mean, it was just insane. It's like,
Yeah.
how could even people do that? No wonder they
Yeah.
weren't doing a lot of drugs back then. Wasn't to get high, was just to get relief from the pain.
Sounds cool, man. That sounds awesome. So, is there any new material coming out from Fabrizio Grossi? You know, a single, a new album. What's out there, man? What's coming out?
Yes, absolutely. I invite everyone to visit either fabriziogrossi.com or soulgarageexperience.com. It's the same landing page. That's my page. It tells you about everything that I'm doing on the production end and on my solo music endeavor, Soul Garage Experience, exactly. And that's a hub to reach my YouTube channel. So please, if you're watching and you end up in there, subscribe, like, leave comments. Spotify, all the other social medias, and you can listen to all the music that you want to. That probably is the best way. And my record, the first record of Soul Garage Experience, was just released on September 10th. We have 4 different singles. They're already out, and they all have videos. So if you ended up visiting fabriziogrossi.com or soulgarageexperience.com, just click on YouTube. You go and you can check out the video. Otherwise, you can stream the record, and if you want to buy it, it's available on all network, Amazon, Apple. You can do downloads, you can buy physical, or you can end up in my store, definitely can get it. And if you don't want to buy it, as long as you listen to it, I'm happy no matter what. And also I'm looking really forward 2022, because we're going to have a new Supersonic Blues Machine released. We're working on the tour for next year, and I'm putting together some other shows and stuff for Soul Garage Experience. So it's kind of like a pretty busy right now.
Yeah, cool, man. Is there any chance you guys are going to come to the UK for, is there like a mini UK tour?
No, actually, with Supersonic, we're actually planning on a full-blown UK tour. Hopefully, everything goes right, because it's the 3rd time that we canceling it because of COVID. And as far as Soul Garage Experience, I will definitely love to. My agent, our European agent, is London-based. So obviously, whenever I can, I try to post us there, and I love it. I love your country. I lived there for a little bit, and most of my friends are there. My singer with Supersonic is from the UK, so it's kind of like a second home. As you see, our stage setup with Supersonic, everything is like American and all of it. You have, the Star Span Bangle, but right now you also have the Union Jack coming up on the other side because of Chris. So I'm always at home in the UK, and I love it.
This has been, I can't thank you enough, man. It's been an absolute awesome chat, and digging right into how you track bass and giving a mini tour of your studio and your setup. Absolutely amazing, man. So before we end this chat, do you want to give a shout out to your fans or the brands like Ibanez and stuff like that, all the brands that you use?
Absolutely. Well, first of all the fans and the music fan out there that would allow me to do this for all this time, I can only do it because people buy the music that I work on, that I write, or that I'm involved with, and comes to see the shows with the band and the artists that are performing. So thank you so much. My whole family is grateful, and myself too. That's it's an incredible blessing. Absolutely. But then again, to all these companies and all these big manufacturers and the geniuses behind the creation of these instruments that make our life easier as musicians. Like I said, obviously, Ibanez for basses, Mark Bass for amps and studio, Trickery and pedals, Ernie Balls for the strings. But then again, there is a bunch of other companies that I'm working to that are very fundamental for what I'm doing. Lewitt Microphone incredible company. I'm using both regular microphones, dynamic and studio microphones with them. What do you call it? Voodoo Lab, MXR, SansAmp. Oh, of course. Sorry, we're in digital age. IK Multimedia and Overloud. I would be a naked man without their software. A lot of the trickery that comes out of my Pro Tools rig use their plugins and their technology. So thank you for all these folks to make me able to just to allow me to be able to do the music that I'm making.
This has been great, man. Yet again, thanks you very much for agreeing to do this chat. And, I can't wait to catch you when you are on tour here in the UK. So we'll catch you soon, man, and take care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ryan, and bye, everybody. Take care of each other.